Break Fix Podcast is all about capturing the living history of people from all over the autosphere, from wrench turners and racers to artists, authors, designers, and everything in between. Our goal is to inspire a new generation of petrol heads that wonder, how did they get that job or become that person? The road to success is paved by all of us because everyone has a story.
Break Fix has always been about capturing the living history of the automotive world. The builders, the storytellers, the caretakers, and the people who keep this hobby alive one machine at a time. And tonight we're welcoming someone who sits right at the crossroads of preservation, passion, and pure automotive spectacle. Stewart Howden is the president of Classic Auto Mall, one of the most extraordinary automotive destinations in the country, a place where 1,000+ classic and collector cars live under one roof, where barn finds sit steps away from concourse-level restorations, and where every aisle feels like walking through a living museum of American car culture. Stewart isn't just the guy who runs the place, he's the steward of thousands of stories, each one with its own history, its own quirks, and its own path to the mall's massive showroom.
From his early days in the automotive world to overseeing one of the largest indoor classic car facilities on the planet, Stewart has built a reputation for connecting people with the cars they've dreamed about for decades. Whether it's a survivor-grade muscle car, a chrome-soaked cruiser, or a forgotten gem pulled from long-term storage, he's seen it all. And he's here to share with us what it's like to manage a collection that never stops growing, changing, and surprising even the experts. Tonight, we dive into the stories behind the mall, the market, the machines, and the man who keeps the automotive time capsule running.
That's right. And joining me tonight is returning co-host Don Weberg from Garage Style Magazine, one of the many personalities on the Motoring Podcast Network. Welcome back, Don.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be back.
Well, with that, let's welcome Stewart officially to Break Fix.
Welcome, Stewart.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I've been looking forward to this. I got my notes and I'm ready to go and talk cars and go down rabbit holes that we didn't even expect.
I like to hear that. Well, Stewart, like all good Break Fix stories, there's a superhero origin story out there. So tell us about the genesis of Classic Auto Mall and how you got into the collector car space. And this is such a unique operation in the automotive world. There's got to be a big story behind the path to the mall. Take us on that journey.
Sure. So I started out like anybody. I loved cars as a kid, Hot Wheels and all the different iterations of cars and classic cars and sports cars and just any kind of cars I was into. What really got me over the hump was the Sounds of Sebring, a record album that a neighbor kid had, and we went to their house one night and he played it for me and it was just nirvana. I thought, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. So I always wanted to be involved in classic cars, but never really knew how to do it. Had a career path of in music and different things and, just wasn't really sure what I was going to do and how I was ever going to get into classic cars. And long story short, met a guy who had an auction. It was interesting. He was working with eBay Cruise at the time, and eBay Cruise offered me a job to go to Auburn, Indiana and run this big auction facility out of the blue. And I had no experience in anything automotive collector car world other than I just loved cars. But that kind of started my path. And then I met so many wonderful people and ended up, I had a museum in Branson, Missouri that was a tourist attraction. I ended up in North Carolina for a couple of years. My wife and I finally ended up in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, in the center of the state, working with a guy, Grant Miller, one of the finest people you've ever met in your life, who did a dealer auction every week. And once a year did a classic car sale and said, hey, I want you to come run this. And it was good timing for us. And kids were in college and needed a little extra income and a steady paycheck instead of being an entrepreneur and all that. So we're doing that. And I get a call from a guy in Morgantown, Pennsylvania, which I have never even heard of. And he says, hey, I hear you're the guy who knows consignment classic cars. And I said, well, I've had some experience in it and so on and so forth. And he said, well, I need a business plan because I'm going to do a consignment-based classic car dealership. And I happen to have a business plan already. My doodling days were not scratching on a napkin. They were writing out a business plan of this. I wasn't sure that it was this or a mall or a warehouse or something, but it was a big unlimited space building. So I had this business plan already done. So I just scratched out the name and put his name in and Morgantown, where? Morgantown, Pennsylvania, not West Virginia, and put that in and sent it to him and he bought it from me. And he bought the deal. And I said, well, that's great. So I told my wife and I said, we got an extra little money. Let's go take a vacation. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call and the guy says, the family has voted. And I said, Okay. And he said, we want the guy who wrote the plan to come execute the plan. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of happy where I'm at and not quite sure what the plan that you're talking about is, but I'll come visit you on a weekend. So a Saturday came and I drove over to Morgantown. It was about a 2.5 hour drive, and I'm not knowing what to expect. I've talked to this guy on the phone a couple of times. He sent me money. The check didn't bounce. So, there's a good start of the relationship there. And I pull into the parking lot of this outlet mall that was built in the early 80s. There's the worst beat up Expedition Ford you've ever seen in your entire life. Brown with scratches and chips and all kinds of stuff on it. And this guy sitting in this Expedition has got a long white ponytail and a long white beard. And he's older gentleman, maybe 10 years older than I am at the time, 15 years older. Not what I expected at all. I get in his car and I'm thinking, this has got to be a prank. I mean, who is this guy? What is this? I don't understand. How can this possibly be my dream thing in this weird scenario? Long story short, we came into the mall and he had bought over the years 400 barn finds for his collection, all different types. And he had lined them up in all the storefronts of the whole entire mall with pipe and drape behind them. So it looked like each room was full, even though each room was only maybe a tenth or a 1/15th full. But when we went in, none of the hallways had anything in them, but there was these 400 barn finds that were all in these rooms, and it was just like overwhelmingly intriguing. Number one, I think if the building had been empty, I would have never agreed to come here and do it. I think I would have just said, this is too surreal. I'd be careful what you wish for. A chocolate sundae every day for 365 days is no fun. And I'm thinking this is going to be just something, I don't know. But he said, we want you to come do it. We will partner up on this deal. It's a great facility, 336,000 square feet on 27 acres, right on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, great car country area. So I said, okay. And then I better check with my wife. And I checked with her, and she kind of reluctantly said, well, it sounds like something worth trying. And we moved here in September of 2017 and officially launched the business in January of 2018. It's been a roller coaster, unbelievable ride. And I don't mean ups and downs. I just mean a wild ride. It's just been crazy the way this thing has grown and built. And we got to about 1,100 cars at one point in time. And it wasn't overwhelming. It was actually pretty cool. We actually had a good system that actually made it work for us. And, the building was designed for us in 1985 by Kemmons Wilson, the founder of Holiday Inn, but he didn't know it at the time. But no stairs. All the doors are big enough for cars to get through. Couldn't have been, and it has a Holiday Inn connected to it. So we can have events and have a place for people to stay. And it was just one of those things that it was divine intervention.
Stewart, what's interesting about this part of your story is that unlike a lot of other automotive businesses, whether they're motorsport or otherwise, you survived COVID. You started just before and have made it out the other side successfully and continue to grow, whereas a lot of other places have unfortunately closed their doors. So I have to right away say, congratulations, bravo. I mean, that's commendable.
COVID happened, basically, we were shut down the day before my birthday, March 18th of 2020. We laid everybody off, including our son who worked for us. My wife is our office manager. My wife and I locked the front doors of the building, and we're walking past the reception area where the receptionist would normally sit, and the phone rang. And I said, oh, hold on, let's see what this is. Somebody forgot something or whatever. Classic Auto Mall. Well, yes, we do have a 67 Mustang for sale. Yeah? Yeah, you're going to buy it? Okay. All right. Then all of a sudden the other line's ringing. I was like, Kathy, get back over here. She answered the phone. Yeah, we do have a 71 Camaro for sale. All of a sudden the phone's ringing and it's not stopping. And we're like, what's going on? Nobody's going to be buying cars during COVID. It was the exact opposite. Everybody wanted to buy cars. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. The good news is that we had at the time about 900 cars in inventory, and we had the wherewithal and the facilities and business plan in place to make it work without ever seeing a person or touching a person or being in their space. And recall, hauling truck drivers were exempt from any of that. So even though a classic car was pushing the boundaries of what they were talking about when they allowed essential trucks to travel, here we are. We're doing business. We're literally sliding titles and checks in between the glass doors of our front of our building to the consignor. And truckers are coming up and we're leaving the keys in a box outside and they're grabbing the key. I mean, we were business as usual. We called our son, said, come back to work. Now, the downside, or good side and downside, 900 cars to 400 cars in about 6 months. All of a sudden we were down on inventory drastically. But we survived. We made it. And of course, we learned so much of our business during COVID of things that we could do and do better and more efficiently. And we brought everybody back, whenever we came back. I can't remember the exact date it was, July or August. Everybody came back and we went back to full staff and we started churning again. And then events started happening and we were back in business. And it was one of those things that I just knew when COVID hit. I was like, well, you'd think something like this would ruin it, something just so beyond your control. And it turns out it couldn't have been better. It worked out really well.
And that's a really important point you make, because we saw a shift in the collector market from that time forward. And we're still riding that bubble. And I know this is something you talk about on your show all the time. But there's another thing I wanted to pull on. There's a thread. There's something you said. You said that album, The Sounds of Sebring. And what I find interesting for those that are watching this behind the scenes on Patreon, your office is full of racing memorabilia and you're a classic car guy. Explain that to me.
Well, first of all, my office is a 5-year-old me with an unlimited budget. So, and I've always been into race cars and European sports cars, believe it or not. So I'm into Porsches and BMWs and Mercedes, and that's what I drive. But I have just a fond of affection for classic cars, whether it's a 57 Thunderbird or a 1960s, whatever. I mean, I've got a passion for all things automotive, cars, trucks, vans, motorcycles, sports cars, race cars. But for some reason, my office leans heavily on race cars, and I don't know why. It wasn't by design or a plan. It just kind of happened somehow, some way. I just ended up with a lot of race car stuff.
He says with the most subtle sarcasm, first of all, he's a Porsche guy. He's sitting in a 911 GT3 seat. That's not like some bargain basement, bought it off Amazon. I could recognize that right away. I'm going to go out on a limb. You're a Tifoso. That's Ferrari Formula One stuff behind you. Is that right?
Jacket and some Formula One pictures there, and the 3.0 BMW CSL, which is in the background up there, which is one of my favorite race cars of all time.
I knew you were a true Ferrari fan, Stewart, when I saw the 499P at Le Mans up on your wall there. So, we're kindred spirits. It's all good.
Funny how you lean towards certain things and then your respite is something completely different. Like I worked in country music and I'd have to literally, when I left our live performance theater at night in Branson, Missouri, I'd have to get in my car and on my way home, I'd have to listen to Iron Maiden to kind of equal myself out from the country music. So you listen to country music all day and all night, and then you turn some Iron Maiden on, and then eventually you kind of just balance. So that was my thing. And, I tell you the other thing that got me into cars a little bit later on, but it kind of solidified it. There's a great picture. I was talking to our guest yesterday about this. There's a great picture. It was an advertisement for Lotus. It's a picture of Colin Chapman sitting on the hood of a Lotus Esprit in gold, and his 414 Cessna twin-engine plane in black and gold livery is parked right behind him, and he's in a three-piece suit. And I thought, oh my God, that is it. If you could ever get to that, that's nirvana. That's game over, mic drop, whatever we used to call it back then.
Stewart, I have that ad framed in my garage.
No kidding. I love that.
I do. Yeah.
It's also in Cromback's biography, Chapman and His Machines. So it's a very, very famous picture.
Yeah.
Before we move on to talk a little bit more about the mall itself, I have one question I have to ask because, as a Tifoso, as a Porsche fan, we're going to ask you a classic pit stop question from Break Fix. The only one we're probably going to ask on this episode. You are at the head of the boardroom when two designs are presented in front of you. You have to decide which one to build. And that is the space age Porsche 959 or the passionate Ferrari F40. Which one do you choose?
It's funny. We had a conversation about the 959 on my show yesterday because my guest has a 959. It was interesting, and it was one of those ones that was done by Canepa, so they added more horsepower and all the different things because they're a little crude from the era when they came in. But I wrote a paper on the 959 and the F40 when I was on my third version of trying to go to college, and that's a whole long story in itself. I got 3.5 years done and then waited too long to go back, and they said, well, you have to start over because you waited too long. So I wrote a paper on the 959 and the F40. I have to say, as much as I love both cars, from a value standpoint, you'd say the F40 because look at the value that it's become. But we didn't know that back in the day when we were sitting in the boardroom making a decision. So I would have picked the 959 at the time just because it was so, 444 horsepower, twin turbo, all-wheel drive, looked like a Porsche, but most people wouldn't know the difference between it and a 911. It would look the same to them. And that's no different than a 288 GTO and a 308 Ferrari. But I love 935 Porsches. I don't even think I have a 935 on my wall, which is kind of surprising. It's funny now I'm thinking about this. I love the 935, and purists will say, "Oh, that's not a purpose-built car. You got to love the 962 or the 956 or, the 917." I don't know. The 935 was my era. I went to Riverside in 1982 and watched John Paul and the Whittington brothers and all the guys racing back in the day. And Riverside was just like, I couldn't be in a cooler place if I dreamt of it. I couldn't have made it up to be any cooler. So the 959 would get the nod back in the day. Today, I might err towards the F40.
So you are in a very small group of people that have picked the 959. The F40, like hands down, usually gets picked because it's so raw and raucous and as closest to a street-going race car as you can get. That's not a bad thing. But it's really interesting the people that choose and then how they articulate and justify their choice of the 959. So good job. That was really well done.
I think the sophistication of the 959 is what got me. I love raw horsepower and raw power, but there's something about a well-balanced vehicle that did it for me, and especially the 950. And I've never gotten to drive one of these days. Hopefully, I'll get to drive one if I become friends with somebody who's got one close to us.
All right. Let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit more about the mall itself. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a first-time visitor to Classic Auto Mall. Some might say it's like stepping through an encyclopedia of American car culture, but how would you describe a trip through the mall? What do you see? How did you guys organize 27 acres of space?
So what we did is, as we started the consignment business in 2018, as I said, we were taking cars. We were advertising that, hey, this is what we do. We'll sell your car for you. This is our program. This is how it works. And of course, everything that we did, we started out on the lower scale, the quality of cars, the amount of commitment that you had to make, all of that. So we don't charge admission for you to attend and come to the mall. We don't charge any upfront fees for you to consign your car. That was the only fight that my partner and I ever had, by the way, was not charging admission. He wanted to charge some kind of admission because he had it in his head. You have to charge admission to these things. And my theory was, no, I want more bodies through the building, because even if it's a group of senior citizens, they all have kids and uncles and nephews and different people that are into cars, and it'll be a way to spread the word. But anyway, back to your question. We tell people all the time, we're at these shows and events talking about Classic Auto Mall. We'll say to a guy, 336,000 square feet. Well, you might as well say, I jumped over the moon. They have no idea what the reference point of that is. It doesn't mean anything. We have 1,000 cars in the building. Okay, if you say so. It doesn't have any kind of bearing on reality to people. But the greatest is when they walk in the door and they go, oh, wow, I knew that there was cars in here, but I didn't really. It's cars everywhere you go. It's like a mall for cars, literally. And when they get to the very center and you can do a 360 and pivot and look down each of the hallways, and each one is full of 70, 80, 90 cars in each hallway, in addition to what's in the rooms, it's overwhelming. It's one of those things that you see the guys and they look at their watch and they go, oh, I didn't plan enough time for this. I've got way less time than I thought to go ahead and see all these cars.
You have like a little golf cart to get you around?
I have a personal golf cart because I don't have time to be walking this daggum mall, and I'm lazy. We actually have all the guys. We probably have 7 or 8 electric golf carts. We have 3 electric John Deere Gators. And then we have a little electric trolley tram type thing that we've kind of outgrown because we can't fit it around the corners like we could before. But it's a spread out space. And if the guys were walking all day to doing this, they get half of what they get done in a day on a regular basis, because there's only so much. Steps matter. We all know that in any kind of business. How many steps you take is a relation to how much money you can make.
And a big part of your business is barn find cars, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not just dealing with late model collectibles. You're dealing with pretty much everything, but barn finds are a big part, aren't they?
Obviously, the most cars we had in the building was the 400 barn finds of my partners. We've sold off a couple of hundred of those since we started. And there's about 100 that he's decided to keep that, no amount of money will buy it from him, even if it doesn't have any value. It has sentimental value.
Okay.
So we've done well with barn finds, and we actually still sell quite a few, but the ratio is not as strong as it was when we first started in 18 and 19 and 20, just because we've sold a lot of these collections. We have a few more that are coming up. We have an auction coming up in a week that will be about half barn finds. And that's mostly how we sell those. They're tougher to sell. In the old days, you could put a barn find on eBay, no title, no keys, no battery, no reserve, and the guy would sell it and you do pretty well on it. Nowadays, it's a little tougher. It's harder to get titles for cars. It's not the same world as it used to be if there's a missing title. So our focus has been always barn finds, but we take a $5,000 El Camino just as seriously as we take a $1.5 million Ferrari and everything in between. We give everything the same program, take the same set of pictures. We do the same detailing of it. We promote it the same way. We're equal opportunity here, and we don't look down our nose at anybody's dream car because, everybody starts somewhere.
Right.
And a $5,000 El Camino guy could be a $50,000 Corvette guy who could be a $150,000 Jaguar guy. Blessing of this place is that when we first started, we had no idea how many classic cars were in this part of the world within 100 miles of us. There was nobody who was saying, oh, Southeast Pennsylvania, that's the car world. Forget California, forget Florida, forget Scottsdale. Nobody was saying that.
It's interesting to me. I'm constantly looking at cars for sale. I can't afford any of them, but I look. And it's amazing to me the percentage of them that come from Pennsylvania. That is one amazing, amazing car state. It really is.
Yeah. We waited 5 years in our business before we did a deep dive into where our consignments were coming from. We advertise, we promote where our sales go to. We'll do on the podcast show. We'll say, this week we sold a car to Houston, Texas, and San Jose, California, and Denmark, and so on and so on. But we never really deep dove into where the cars were coming from. And we should have done it, but I didn't really want to know the answer, I think. I ultimately just didn't want to know where our cars were coming from, how far of a distance they were coming from. And what we found was after 5 years, 80% of our cars were coming from within 75 miles of where we sit, which was encouraging and both frightening at the same time, because it's like, oh, wow, I would have thought it would have been 150 miles on average, and it was really not. It was 75 miles where 80% of our cars came from. And we didn't know that starting out. So, God bless whoever was looking after us for that deal.
Are there any barn find stories that really kind of turn you on, the ones that you can't forget? They just give you goosebumps when you think about them?
My partner found a 1923 Chevrolet Weedman motorhome. And there was a tree growing through the middle of it. It's a wooden back. It's a Chevrolet, which is surprising. It's not a Ford in 1923. Yeah. It's a center seat for driving the vehicle. So it's literally in the dead center of the windshield, like a McLaren F1, only different. It has an armoire in it, and it has a bed in it, and it has these cool flaps that open up to allow a breeze to come through the top of it, and it has a slide out. Not unlike a Prevost of modern era buses that have these big electric slide outs. It's got a fold down kind of tent piece that folds out, and you've got like a canvas top on it. And you would sleep there, and then you had your armoire and all this. And this was something that you never see these things. It's still in our building. It's still probably the most popular vehicle of all types that we have in the building. People gravitate to this thing more than just about anything, and I love it. And it's great to see kids and grandpa, grandma, and mom and dad and the kids all just equally flock to this thing and go, whoa. Where do you see something like that? And you could put the prettiest, shiniest, whatever right next to it, and nobody would care.
Absolutely. Very cool.
You said something interesting there. You put the prettiest, shiniest, whatever next to it. So how do you guys organize the cars? So you have 1,000 cars. Are they just hitherto and everywhere? Or are they broken down by year or genre or by country? Like, how did you guys organize the collections?
My guys will ultimately, for some odd reason, try to put all the Corvettes together, try to put all the Mustangs together. Right now, we have, I think, 57 Corvettes in inventory and probably 45 Mustangs. What my goal has always been is to have everything spread out in kind of a hodgepodge, $5,000 car, a $15,000 car, a $50,000 car. No rhyme or reason to it, because I was always taught in business is that you didn't want to pigeonhole yourself into having a person that came into your grocery store and only go to one area, and then they leave and they never see the rest of it. Because we have guys who come in looking for a Corvette, and then they see a Fiat Spider that their wife has always wanted. And if every car was in its own little area, they may have just gone to the Corvette room and that was it. But now they're walking through, seeing the rest of the cars. There's a Fiat Spider. My wife's always wanted one of those. I hadn't thought about one of those in 25 years, but here it is right here. I can buy it today. And they'll buy that. And all of a sudden you'll have a sale that you never anticipated. The guy who was coming to look at a Z06 Corvette. So we kind of gave up on trying to put them in any sense of order because it's one of those things, like herding cats. It just make you crazy. You just would never. I have so many anal retentive qualities about myself that if I let them start doing that, I would get on the bandwagon very quickly, and then I would just go nuts about anything that was out of place or anything like that. I'm a Disney clean and green guy in an old, dusty building that really, I mean, not many people would buy a building like we're in because they're afraid of the maintenance and the upkeep and all that because it's an older building. But my partner loves these older buildings, and it doesn't cost nearly as much to maintain them as you would think, although the electric bill is quite steep here. But
So for the cars that are staying permanently, that are not for sale, have you set them up in such a way that maybe they're like in a diorama, or they're surrounded by their own type of memorabilia, like a Buick room, or you have an Oakland room or something like that?
no, we only have a handful of vehicles that aren't going anywhere. We've got the aforementioned Weedman camper. We've got a Volkswagen replica of a Volkswagen bus that was at Woodstock that sat up on the hill at Woodstock, and they completely did a replica of that. And it's really cool, not for sale. But 99.999% of our vehicles are for sale in the building, and mostly American-made Mustang, Camaro, Chevelle, Thunderbirds is our bread and butter. Would I love it to be filled with a Riva boat like I have over here, or an F40, or a 959, or a Testarossa? Of course I would. But the practicality of it is that to do something in this scale, you got to have your bread and butter stuff. You got to be like Walmart. You got to sell a ton of widgets at a nickel profit, and you'll do good in the long run.
You sell more Fords than Ferraris.
Yeah.
You mentioned the electric bill being high. Is that because of all the battery tenders you have to run for 1,000 cars?
It's that and the heat and the air, and we don't keep it. It ain't cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Trust me. You wear your jacket in the winter, you'll probably leave it on, but you got to keep it somewhat climate controlled. We have 157 HVAC units on our roof. Yeah, so it's a big old place just the lighting bill, just for the lights. Forget the heat and air is expensive.
So let's sort of switch gears and talk about the collector space from your vantage point. Sitting on top of an inventory of 1,000 cars, you saw everything go up, 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 and used car market went crazy. Even, your off rental car Nissan Altima is 3 times more expensive than it should be right now. Hopefully that bubble maybe will correct itself in the future. But what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What do you think is cooling? Where do you think things are going?
Well, I can tell you that the one thing we felt from COVID just happened within the past 6 to 8 months, and that is the cyclical nature of people collecting 1 or 2 cars at a time is about a 5-year window. So everybody that bought their car in COVID, post-COVID area within, 4 to 5, 6 years ago is now at that crossroads where they're ready to sell the car. They want to step up to something else. And this is a huge part of our market. But guess what? In 2020, when they bought that Chevelle, the market was $50,000 for that car. And guess what it is now? Not 50. It's 40, or maybe it's 35. So now all these guys that bought at the top of the market, which was inevitable it was going to happen, are now thinking, oh, I'd like to get rid of this car. Now I'm upside down in it. I got, more money in it than it's worth. The old, I promised my wife we'd make a profit on every car we bought. I knew we were going to hit a home run. The market was never going to shift. Didn't really happen. The market's still a little bit soft and just, dare I say, generic classic cars, being a 70 Chevelle with a 350 in it, not the original motor, not the original transmission. Nice car, number 2.5, 3 condition, nice paint job, has flaws, great driver car. The market on those is just not going to be very good now. And will it come back? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, we don't see the 55, 6, and 7 Thunderbirds ever coming back to the prices they were at. We don't see the 39 Ford Deluxes convertibles that were, $80,000, $90,000. We don't see them coming back. But the Duesenberg market ain't suffering. The Ferrari market ain't suffering,
Let's talk about that, because I'm sure you've been keeping track like everybody else. Kissimmee was a big move forward in the Ferrari space. There's been obviously incremental rise in investment in the Ferrari space for years. It's never a bad bet. It's sort of like nobody got fired for selling IBM. You never really lose money buying a Ferrari. But that Bachmann collection sort of reset everybody's focus on Ferrari for this year. What are your thoughts?
Well, when you see an Enzo go for $12 million that, was going for 3 and 4 million not that long ago. And I mean, I know not that long ago in my mind is usually a lot shorter time than it actually is. Because yesterday to me is 5 years ago, or 5 years ago is yesterday, The thing that surprises me most about the Ferrari market, I get the hypercar stuff. I get the whatever 5 is Fecta, where you've got the 288 GTO, the LaFerrari, the F40, the F50, and the Enzo. Every guy who collects Ferraris who's got any money, that you have to have those 5. It has to be part of your collection. I get those going up in value. I get that they're going to continue to increase in value just because they're amazing cars and limited production, and not everybody that wanted one could get one. And so that leaves a lot of room for marketability out there. What I don't understand is a 400i that brings $150,000, or a 308, which are, pardon me, are not very nice cars to drive. They're not very fast. They're not very reliable. They're not very much of anything. And for them to bring $100,000 plus, I remember when a 308 Ferrari you'd buy for 20, and then you go put 20 in it, and you'd have a car that was worth 15. So I don't understand that segment of the market. I get the upper end of the market. Listen, the wealth in this country and the world, for that matter, is immeasurable in compared to what it was even 25 or 30 years ago. And the amount of money that people can go and spend, I mean, standing next to a guy at an RM auction, and all of a sudden a $12 million bid, and it's the guy next to you you've been chatting with, who you thought was just some guy. And here's this guy, buying a $12 million car. And it happens on a regular basis because of all the cars that we know about that sell at all the high-end auction houses and sell with us and sell with, some of the other classic car dealers in the world. There are probably double that in private transactions because most rich guys are very protective of their identity and what they are and who they are. Remember when the Forbes list first came out? They had a hard time getting anybody to admit that they had $1 million. People didn't want to even talk about it. When I was growing up, the rich people drove Buicks and Oldsmobiles, and the middle-class guys are the ones who drove the Cadillacs and the Lincolns. We didn't have any idea that our neighbors were as wealthy as they were because they didn't show it. They didn't flaunt it. They didn't want to be on some list telling me how much money I got. It'd be funny to go back to the Forbes 400 list on the very first year that it came out and see what the top level was. It was probably, like 30 million or something.
Stewart, the guy you're talking about, the neighbor, you don't know how rich he is. That's Eric. That's Eric. Hit him up for a loan. He'll do it to you.
Only if it's a hot hatchback, Don. Only if it's a hot hatch.
That's the problem. When we talk about this hobby, we want to get the kids involved. We want to keep the involvement of people who may have not been collector car people, but it's difficult if you want to send somebody to go, let's say, Amelia Island. And I'm not picking on Amelia Island. I love that Concours. It's a great event. But the Ritz-Carlton, if you want to stay at the host hotel, is $2,700 a night, and it's a 3-night minimum. I don't care how much money you have. At some point in time, we may have to say, enough is enough. We're not, we're mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore, like Network, the movie. But we're going to say, I'm not going to pay $2,700 a night, even if I can. Don't get me in a grocery store because I don't even understand. This is what happened to the good old days.
Well, let's not solve that problem tonight. Let's talk about something else. We had this discussion, Don, on several What Should I Buy episodes that we've done in the past, and that is thinking about grandpa's car. And that is a generational shift. And the shift is occurring now, right in front of our eyes, where when we were growing up, grandpa's car was from the 50s. Maybe that he drove every day. You kind of looked at what grandpa drove every day versus what grandpa aspired to your point, Stuart, from earlier, those Duesenbergs and the Packards and the cars of the 20s that they grew up with, things like that. So when we keep shifting down the line, kids today, my girls, as an example, what did my dad drive? Well, cars from the 90s. Cars from the 90s are really popular right now, which is really interesting because they have not yet bubbled into this escalation curve that we're talking about. But I don't want to sit here and debate the end of the Middle Ages with 90s cars. What I want to talk about is the cars that are coming out right now. In your opinion, with your wise eyes and all this experience, what is collectible today? What's going to be grandpa's car 20, 30 years in the future when I'm a grandpa?
The short answer is I don't know. And my reason for not knowing is not understanding exactly how the technology of the side is going to work in the future. Not because cars will be so technologically advanced. It's because the electronics will be technologically advanced. And for a 1990 Lexus, they're not going to make any of that crap. They're not going to make any of the parts for that. So maybe that begats that to become collectible because It's going to become to the point where you can't buy the little computer box that went on a 1991 Infinity Q45 because they don't make them anymore. And nobody wants to make them because there's no value in it.
And my answer to that, I said it on another episode, there's an LS swap ready everywhere you turn.
Exactly. There will always be crate Chevy motors. That's the beauty of what that is. But you know what? The cars that I gravitate towards still are 90s cars. 93 through 95, 928 Porsche GTS, a BMW 850 CSI, Supra twin turbo. I love those cars because the 90s for me were the interim years. I had cool cars when I was a kid, 16 through 20 something. Then I couldn't afford anything during that era when they had those cool twin turbos. And the good news is it gave me hope that if I ever did figure out a way to make any money, that they were still building cool cars. Because we thought in the late 70s, if you drove a 77 Plymouth Ferrari, you would realize that the death of the automobile was near and it was coming. There was no way there was going to be anything cool made anymore.
But Corinthian leather, Stu. Corinthian leather.
You know what's funny about that? Let's take a 1978 Corvette. Those of us who are car people go, well, that's a 78 Corvette, underpowered, the Malaise era. There wasn't much to it. 180 horsepower in the L48, 220 in the L82. It just was not. But if you stop and back up about 25 feet and look at a 78 Corvette, take every preconceived notion about how well it performs and does and doesn't do this. That's a good looking car.
It is. When you dress them up, yeah.
We forgot that because we were, that old 78 Corvette, nothing.
The solution to the 78 Corvette problem is still the same, Stu. LS swap. Done.
The LS swap solves everything, right?
That's right.
I would love to see it.
What I wanted to talk about is actually a few steps back from what Stuart was saying about the electronics of these cars. And, I was a believer in that too. I thought, all these cars with their whiz bang stuff going on, they're going to just basically become extinct because nobody will be able to fix them. One car I really like, and a lot of people, it's one of those polar cars. People either really like it or they really hate it. No, don't worry. I'm not going after that one.
Okay, good.
It's actually the Aston Martin Lagonda.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a big wedge of a brick of a sedan. And the early ones, as you know, they were hugely technological for the 70s. Hugely. They had stuff going on in there that was ready for NASA.
It had 2 fuses, Don. 2 fuses.
And, really, they only needed 3. But Lucas said, let's save some money.
But it came with that smoke in a jar, remember?
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Yeah. But I'll tell you though, it was one of those English magazines, and I was reading an article, and I bought the magazine because it had this article about this guy who also likes these Lagondas, and he was younger, he was in his 30s, so he buys, I forget what year, 77, 75 Lagonda, filled with electrical problems. It just had electrical problems all over the place. He's younger. He's like Eric. He grew up techie nerd, and so he understands wiring and all this stuff. The next thing you know, he's pulling this car apart to figure out what can I do to fix this. He finds out that in the 90s, Nissan was using a whole bunch of products and components that were very similar to what the Aston Martin was using back in the 70s. So he started Mickey Mousing it together. It became one of the most reliable Aston Martins. It's still running around in England right now. He became a member of the club. The car became almost his daily driver. This thing is solid as a rock. It's incredible. While I was reading this, I'm saying to myself, okay, great, there's hope for this car. Not that I'll ever be able to afford one, but there's hope. The younger people who are used to computer controls, they might be the ones who fix this stuff. I mean, look at the World War II birds. They were what? Exposed to the airplanes, exposed to the Jeeps. And what did they have to do when they were over there? Keep them running. Because guess what? There's not a repair shop around the corner. You have to keep this thing going. Okay. So based on that, what they do, they became little engineers. They knew how to keep the Jeeps going, the airplanes go. God forbid the airplane breaks down. But you see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. It's just advanced. Now it's computer stuff. And there's again a young person who was exposed to computers his whole life. And now he's not afraid of going after this Aston Martin. And not only that, because he had experience with Nissan cars, he's looking at the Aston Martin stuff saying, this is so familiar. This looks just like what was used on the 200SX. This looks like this. This looks like that. So they were able to put it back together. And I think that's what kind of gives me hope for some of these cars that are coming down the line that I look at, and I'm sure you guys too. I look at them, I think, holy cow, I don't want anything to do with that. Well, yeah, because I was raised by World War II people. the difference in thinking is there, but these kids aren't intimidated by them, not by a long shot.
I like the 200SX reference too.
I know, right?
It's a great car.
Since we're in the middle of car show season,
Yes.
and Car Week is turning into Car Month, as we all know, and we get to bask in its glory every year. There is often a debate that percolates to the surface all the time, and that's restoration versus preservation. And I want to get your thoughts, especially with 1,000 cars at your disposal, where you guys find yourselves in that argument.
I love the preservation side of it if it's within practical and within reason. There's impractical restoration and preservation, unfortunately. A four-door 1940 Plymouth sedan is not practical to restore. It's a shame that it won't be preserved in any way, shape, or form. And it shouldn't always be about value. But we always tell people, buy what you love, restore what you love, spend whatever you feel comfortable spending. If you get some of it back, you've hit a home run. If you don't get any of it back, you were okay with it to begin with. But I love original cars. I love low mileage cars that, have been preserved and are mothballed, if you will. 78 Corvette pace car comes to mind just out of the blue when people were saving those, or the last year for the Cadillac Eldorado convertibles that weren't particularly collectible when things turned around and people started saying, oh, I've got a 78 Corvette with 20 miles on it. And it didn't have the impact that everybody thought it was going to have. And then you have others. Remember the Ford GT when it came out in 2005? It tanked. I had one with 80 miles on it that I was begging to get rid of, and finally got it sold. Had all four options in that midnight blue, and got it sold for 90 grand, and was thankful for it to be gone. And of course, we all know where those went. But the right car. I think a ZL1 aluminum block 1969 Corvette, 4-speed, blah, 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 blah. I think that should be preserved to the nth degree because it is such an important part of the history of the automobile and where we were able to go. Most of us didn't even realize back in the 60s you could check a box that would get an aluminum 427 in a car. No, we didn't know any of that. We just go, oh, that looks cool. That's what I'd like to have. I bought a 75 Trans Am. It was the worst year to possibly buy it. 76 would have been better. This was in 78. 74 would have been better. I could have gotten an SD 455 probably for the same price. I didn't know anything. I just thought, that looks cool. That's what I'd like to own. I mean, it leads from preservation to restoration to resto mods too. So you got that element of it as well too. And my position is that there's room for all of it, A, and B, it depends on the subject. I mean, you could put two cars side by side of each other that were restored, and they're not the same car, even though they have the same specs. You can put two SS 396 Chevelles with 4-speed Muncie M20s, and they're both red, and they both have Krager wheels, and they both have this, and they both have that. But the level that one was done and the level that this one was done, there's so many different variations. So I would say that it has to be almost done on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, there's no committee that rules who gets to, you don't have to come before me to determine whether you restore it, keep it original, or resto mod it. But it's got to be almost on an individual basis because there's reasons that, obviously you don't chuck a DZ302 out of a 69 Z28. I know crate motors are the answer, but at some point in time, that needs to be restored. You don't want to let that engine go by the wayside.
Well, since you went there again, what's your number one car? You'd be like, if ever that came across, you're like, that needs a resto mod. That needs an engine swap. Doesn't care what condition it's in. There's no preservation of that. You talked about the Volare. Is that your resto mod car?
Yeah, I think somehow deep down in the netherworld of my body, somehow a Volare is, I keep talking about it. So there must be something about it, right? There must be a reason I'm talking about it. I've always wanted to have a Pro Touring second gen Camaro.
Oh.
I love that body style of the second gen 70 or 71 through 70 and a half through 77 or whatever year that they kind of changed them a little bit from there, 80, I guess, or so. I always love those second generation Camaros. I always thought it would be fun to have a Canyon carving resto mod to run Mulholland Drive in with a great stereo, with Corbeau seats, Alpine cassette deck that, slid it out of your hand and dropped it easily into the thing. There was so many cool things that you wanted to do to make a resto mod of it. Just it's so modern, but yet so retro looking. I think that would be my one guilty pleasure of that. But I see cars all the time that I think that might make a cool resto mod. And I don't even like resto mods per se. I don't have any fault with them. They're just not my thing normally.
Do you think there's a point, Stuart, where you can't keep the car original anymore? You've got to restore it. Maybe even if just for the next generation, you have to restore this thing.
You don't want a car to just disintegrate, A. And B, at what point do you realize that you'd rather have radial tires than bias ply tires? What point is you'd rather have four-wheel disc brakes on the car to make it stop? What point is you'd like to be a little more comfortable and add vintage air if you could do it in a way that wouldn't disrupt the dash or the firewall or all that? There's all those questions. They're all hard to answer because knowing what I mean, I have a friend of mine who has a dual Gia. And he put vintage air in it. I mean, who does that? Nobody does that. I had a friend of mine who's got a V16 Cadillac, put vintage air in it. He wanted to drive it. He wanted to use it. He wanted to enjoy it. But, his wife wouldn't go because she's just miserable. It's black interior, black exterior. Most car shows are on warm days. And she said, you know what? I'm just not enjoying this. And so he put air in it and everybody's happy. Is that harmful to a V16 Cadillac? I don't know. Probably. Does it matter to him? No, he doesn't care. At the end of the day, we hope that we're all just stewards of these cars, but we also get to enjoy them and use them. And if, God forbid, we take one out and run it into a tree, that's our prerogative, even though, we didn't do it on purpose. I mean, you can't mothball these things. I mean, you can, but we all know that engines and not running and suspensions and not being driven, modern electronics and not being used spell disaster.
Very true. Well, as we look ahead to the future, and as we're on the precipice of celebrating Classic Auto Mall's 10-year anniversary, we're getting very close to that initial meeting with that preservation class Ford Excursion that you described earlier. Let's talk about the next decade. New programs, new experiences, new things on the horizon for Classic Auto Mall. What's your business plan for 2027 through 37?
Our business plan is to become the one place you go when it's time to sell the collection or to sell dad's estate or mom's estate or whoever's it is that's collected the cars, because it's such a slippery slope in the collecting side of it. There's like three schools of thought for collectors. There's the collector who says, I mapped out the whole thing. This is where this car goes. This is where this car goes. Every year I update the value based on the trends and markets. This is the insurance policy. This is what's done to it. This is the history of the car. This is where the hardtop is up in the attic. This is the build sheet that goes with it. There's those guys. Then there's guys who are like, well, I don't really care. Whatever, let them deal with it. They'll have to deal with it. And we see that more often than we see the earlier version. And then there's a guy who's kind of the hybrid, the in-between guy of that. But the guy who says, you know what, just leave it to them, is also the guy on his deathbed who grabs his wife, pulls her down close to him and says, honey, whatever you do, don't sell the Corvette for less than 60. And it happens all the time. Here's the problem with it. Mom and the kids or whoever I'm not profiling here, I'm just using that as an example. Mom and the kids now are left with dad's 10 or 12 cars. Nobody knows anything about them. There may be one in a restoration shop down the street and nobody knows about. There may be one that was at a museum on loan. There may be parts to a car that are, a tri-power setup for a 427 that the guy took just to put a four-barrel on because he didn't want to deal with the tri-power, but you don't want to get rid of it because the original intake and carburetors, and that's valuable, hugely valuable, maybe $10,000. And they have no idea where any of this stuff exists. It's an emotional time. Most of these cars were part of the family. They need somebody who can step in and say, we're going to take over. We've got you. We're going to take every car you got, whether it's a $500 rust bucket in the backyard that dad was schlepping parts off of, or whether it's a $5 million whatever and everything in between. And we're going to take it, we're going to handle it. And you're going to wait for us to give you a call, and then you're going to bring us the title, and we're going to hand you a check from Classic Auto Mall, not some stranger, not people coming to your house. We're going to make this so simple for you. So that's our focus is really right now, is really marketing to that clientele, because we're coming upon a time, in the old days, guys collected, a guy had one Ferrari, or he had a Camaro and a Harley, or he had a Chevelle, or he had a Thunderbird. So many people have so many multitudes of 20, 30, 40 cars. It's commonplace now. And it requires a whole lot of thought and process to get to that. So our goal in the next 10 to 15 years is, there should be some retirement in there somewhere, I'm certain, but probably not, is to really cater to the collections and estates, whether you're pre-planning and thinning the herd, or whether it's been left to you and you don't know what to do and there's no plan or whatever. We want to be able to come in and say, we got this, we got transportation, we got the insurance, we got the parts, we got this, we know where that is. This needs to fix. This you shouldn't fix. This you should sell it just like it is. This should go to this auction. This should go to Classic Auto Mall. This should go to the junkyard. The option may not always be us, but we want to be that go-to who guides you in the right direction, even if it sends a car to bring a trailer or RM auctions. I mean, there's certain cars that we do better with here, and there's certain cars that might do better at another venue. And we're not afraid to say that, because ultimately what we want to become is the thing that people think about when they go, oh, it's time to do this dastardly task that we have to do. That's where I see what we're heading towards. Collectibility of cars, I don't know. It's hard to say. I've given up on trying to predict what's next, because I thought Duesenbergs were never going to come back from the early 2000s, and boy, was I wrong about that.
Based on this, Stuart, if somebody wanted to sell a collection through Classic Auto Mall, what's the process? What are the steps they got to take? Are there any rules involved? What do they do?
Yeah. Let's assume they're not in their hospital bed, their dying breath.
Right. Basically, it's just a phone call. Pick up the phone and call me directly. I'll take any phone call. If you want to yell at me, or if you want to give me praise, or if you want to be somewhere in the middle, I'm okay with it. Pretty thick-skinned. I've pretty much been doing this so long that nothing really trips me up usually. I pretty much got it down to a science. The guys walk into my office and they go, what about this? And I go, well, you just do that, and this. And they go, how do you know that? I go, it's not that I'm smart. It's just that I've thought through every part of this that I possibly could. So what I tell people is, look, if you're having a collection of cars and you're thinking that it's time to thin the herd, to get rid of the downsides, to go from 20 to 2 or 4, pick up the phone and call me. Let's talk about it. We've got a program. It involves lots of different elements of the process, but a lot of it we will do on the cuff. If we get a collection of cars, if somebody's going to bring us 10 or 15 or 20 cars for sale, we'll work with them. We'll work with them on transportation. We'll work with them on helping make some minor repairs. And what we do, we evaluate cars, but we don't tell you to spend $500 to gain $100. We tell you that if you spend $500 to fix this car, it's going to get you another $2,500. Then we're going to guide you in that direction. If it's not going to mean anything to fix something, then we don't tell you to fix it. We're not in this to try to nickel and dime you to, replace every little fuse and this and that and the particulars of this and that. There's so many things that are better off to be left unfixed, A, and B, believe it or not, it's easier to sell a car that you can tell people some problems of than to sell a car that you say is perfect, because there is no such thing as a perfect car. And I can prove that any car you want to show. Well, even cars that come off the showroom floor. I got a new Bronco and it's got orange peel on the roof. It's like...
Well, as you said earlier, Stuart, Classic Auto Mall has become a destination for enthusiasts, for clubs, for families. And so when we think of Classic Auto Mall as more than just a destination, how are you guys sort of flipping the script and reaching out to the broader car communities and the resounding areas? What are you doing to sort of give back?
Well, we have probably 15 to 18 pretty large car shows at our facility every year. We have the Camaro Nationals here, which brings 700 cars. 700 Camaros to our building, in addition to the however many we have in inventory at that particular time, 800, 900,000, 1,100. There's no charge for any of these events to use our facility. Obviously, it's good marketing for us. You bring a bunch of car guys to your parking lot, darn, what could go wrong? Nothing. They see your facility. The thing I'm most proud of in that what we do is the fact that I'll see a group of 4 or 5 guys come in. There's one who's kind of the leader, and he's showing everybody around and telling them the lay of the land, and hey, you got to check out that room, and this is that. Oh, there's that Chevrolet camper that we saw before. And then the following week, I see a splinter group of that group. One of the guys that was in that group has now got 5 of his buddies, and they're coming in, and they're walking through and talking and telling and going. And sometimes I literally will be standing in the mallway, and I'll hear a guy talking, and he'll be explaining Classic Auto Mall to his buddy. And I turn around, and I don't know this guy. I've never met him before. I've never even seen him before in my building, and he knows our program as well as anybody could know it. And I'm like, wow, that's making an impact. That you know that you've made an impact when you can do that. And last, but certainly not least, is seeing the father and the son, the grandfather, the father and the son, the grandfather and the grandson, the daughters, and all coming in and falling in love with cars and getting the nickel tour with grandpa or dad and learning about this and hearing dad explain to him. And dad may get it wrong on a couple of points about a 71 Camaro or a 77 Volare, or, he might get it wrong, but it's okay, because he's sharing the hobby and the passion. And ultimately, that's what we want to do, is we want to share and perpetuate. I know to call it a hobby is a little, obviously it's not a hobby. It's gotten a little bit bigger than that. it still is a camaraderie. As I was saying, when you're at an auction and you're standing next to a couple of guys, and the guy on your left turns out to be the janitor, and the guy on the right is the CEO, and you're just the in-between middle manager guy, and everybody's talking and getting along, and nobody cares who has more money or less money or has this job or has this title or none of that. None of that matters. We're all talking cars. How fun is that? I think that hobby feels like it's still doing well. The next 10 years will be interesting. I don't really know what to think it will happen. God forbid petroleum could be outlawed. Who knows?
California has their way. You won't be able to buy tires for the cars anymore, but we'll leave that where it is.
Thank you.
But with that, Stewart, we've reached that part of the episode where I like to invite our guests to share any shout outs, thank yous, promotions, or anything else that we haven't covered thus far.
Well, I got to say a great shout out to all my buddies at the Radnor Hunt Concours d'Elegance, which is right here in our backyard and was an event that I've known about long before I was in this part of the world. And they've graciously put me on their board of directors, which is, a pinch me kind of moment. And it's one of those things that unless you're a car guy, you probably wouldn't understand. Oh, yeah, they put you on a board of directors. No, it's this prestigious event that I've been following for all these years, and now I'm a part of it. We knew that when we came to this market that we wanted to target the church parking lot car shows. We wanted to target the Concours d'Elegances and all the events in between, the Philly Auto Show that we did for years. We wanted to focus on all of those events because our best marketing for what we do is not a full-page ad in Sports Car Market magazine or Auto Trader or any of that. It's one-on-one in an event. It's setting up our little dog and pony with our truck and trailer, opening up the canvas, turning on the video, showing the drone fly-through footage of our building, and talking to people about how our process works. You don't have to know cars to be a car specialist for Classic Auto Mall. You have to know our process because the guy you're talking to probably knows more about cars than you'll ever know, or about the particular car he's looking for than you'll ever know. And that's okay. And my son, who's 33 years old, wanted to be a car specialist about 3 years ago. And I want to give a shout out to him because he said, I can do it. And I said, no, you're too young. These old guys are going to not listen to you and it won't happen. But what I didn't realize is for years and years and years, he sat at dinner with us every night and here's me and my wife talk about the day and what happened and the process and the procedure. And I see him walk up to a client and at first they got their arms crossed like, who is this young kid? And within 30 seconds, their arms are wide open and they're just absorbing what he's telling them because he's telling them the process. How do you get your car shipped? How do you pay for it? Where do you take it to get it fixed? Where do you do this? Not about what the timing needs to be set at and, what the contents of this are and how to set the valves. And he doesn't have to know any of that. He has to know the process of it because, like I said, the guy standing in front of him knows all that. So, and our staff is amazing. I mean, we have a spec writer and a photographer and a description writer and transportation guys and, the car specialist and my wife is the office manager and administrative assistants that are all just, they're mostly car people and they enjoy it and they love it. And most of them came from a different background than cars. It wasn't their path, but it's worked out to be great here for them.
And I think before we close out, Stu, we probably owe a shout out to our mutual friend Rob Parr over at Collector Car Guide for connecting us all these years ago. So I know he listens to the show. So Rob, if you're listening, thank you for connecting us.
We've been a supporter of Rob since I think the first edition came out in 2020 or whenever it was. I don't remember. I'm amazed at these race car drivers who say stuff like, in 1969, I was passing Jackie Stewart and it was an off-camber curve and there was a little bit of oil on it. I was like, how do you remember that stuff? I can't remember that stuff.
Every guest on Break Fix brings a different lens to the automotive world, but few offer a view as wide, as varied, or as surprising as the one you get when you walk through Classic Auto Mall. Stewart reminds us that behind every car, whether it's a Concours restoration or a dusty barn find, there's a story waiting for the right person to hear. And places like the mall keep those stories alive.
That's right. And if today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you can dive deeper into the world Stewart oversees by following Classic Auto Mall online. They share new arrivals, behind-the-scenes finds, and some truly wild automotive time capsules across their channels on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, all found under @ClassicAutoMall. So with that, Stewart, I can't thank you enough for coming on Break Fix and sharing your story with us. And again, it's great to reconnect with all of our friends in the auto sphere. And even though I haven't personally made it out to Classic Automobile yet, it is definitely on my list of places to visit. So I look forward to reconnecting with you in person again outside of a car show and maybe getting a behind the scenes tour of the facility.
Absolutely. We'll be glad to give you the nickel tour and I might even let you ride in the golf cart. So
The following episode is brought to us in part by Garage Style Magazine. Since 2007, Garage Style Magazine has been the definitive source for car collectors, continually delivering information about automobilia, petroliana, events, and more. To learn more about the annual publication and its new website, be sure to follow them on social media at Garage Style Magazine or log on to www.garagestylemagazine.com. Because after all, what doesn't belong in your garage?
We hope you enjoyed another awesome episode of Break Fix Podcast, brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Grand Touring Motorsports. And if you'd like to learn more about the content of this episode, be sure to check out the follow-on article at gtmotorsports.org. We remain a commercial-free and no annual fees organization through our sponsors, but also through the generous support of our fans, families, and friends through Patreon. For as little as $2.50 a month, you can get access to more behind-the-scenes action, additional pit stop minisodes, and other VIP goodies, as well as keeping our team of creators fed on their strict diet of Fig Newtons, Gummy Bears, and Monster. So consider signing up for Patreon today at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. And remember, without you, none of this would be possible.